Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here, and this is going to be another coronavirus video. So my last video I said that I was on kind of an unofficial quarantine. Thankfully, I'm not on quarantine anymore because the person who I was linked to who potentially had the virus, their test came back negative. So I'm back at work, and you can look at that in one of two ways. In one way, I am out there working, I have a job, I have a paycheck, and that's good. But then there's also the other way of looking at it where I am out there every day risking my life. Well, not necessarily my life, but potentially other people's lives, because if I get sick from somebody who's around me and I can give it to somebody else who could potentially die. Me, I probably will live, not necessarily 100%, but like a 99% chance that I personally would live. But that's not what this video is about. What this video is about is, everybody's wondering, what's the big deal about this coronavirus thing? It's not that deadly, right? In Missouri and in several other states, California, Illinois, New York, and not necessarily the whole state of Missouri, but pockets of Missouri have this stay-in-place order, or this shelter-in-place or stay-at-home order, whatever you want to call it. St. Louis City, St. Louis County, St. Charles County has one that's not really anything, so I don't really understand. And then like Kansas City area, all those have like a stay-in-place order along with several other states and cities and counties and all this. So I come home today from work and I drive past this high school, which is obviously not in attendance right now, but going past all of the tennis courts, there's tons of kids playing tennis and tons of kids running on the track and running around, and that's not what a stay-in-place order is. You're supposed to stay at home, go out for groceries, go to the hospital if you're sick, and that's pretty much it. Unless you're an essential place of business and you're an essential employee, which I am considered an essential employee. In some ways I wish I wasn't, but technically I'm an essential employee in the St. Louis County area. So you're not supposed to be out playing with other kids, and you're not supposed to be going to your neighbor's house. You're not supposed to be going to families' houses, because that's where all the spread comes from. So it just drives me nuts that so many people don't get it. And people have asked me on my other video, what's the big deal? And I see it all over Facebook, and people at work, they just don't get it. And they think, oh, it's no big deal, it's not going to kill that many people, it's not going to infect that many people. But look at the numbers. So here's a little perspective for you. So China is still considered the biggest area that was hit. They had like 81 or 82, somewhere around there, 1,000 cases, which for China that's not a lot, because they have like 1.4 billion people. The United States is number 3, and the United States was one of the last big countries to get hit. We got hit a little later than, say, Italy or South Korea or some of these other countries. Italy is number 2 at like 71 or 72, I don't know, in the 70,000s. They got hit really, really hard, but they got hit quite a bit before we did. We're in like the 64,000 case range, and we're still, we're like only about maybe 1,000 deaths, but we haven't even broken like, we're not even up to like 500 recoveries. Last I checked, it was like 393. Not even 400. It's probably about 400 now, because the numbers keep rising. But just for a little perspective, that's how fast the virus spreads, and it's been here, what, a month? Something like that. At least as far as like, when the numbers really started to go up. So just for a little perspective, China has 1.4 billion people, roughly. The United States has like 350 million people, and we're currently number 3, and we were hit later than most other countries. So that's one point. The second point is, again, how fast it spreads and the incubation period. So if you get sick, you don't know you're sick for 5, 10, up to 14 days, from what I hear. You can be sick for 14 days without even knowing it. And if you go about your daily life, and let's say all these stay-at-home orders didn't work, or they weren't put in place, and you know, hockey and basketball and baseball and everything else was still being played. So on an average day, let's say you're sick, you don't know you're sick, you infect 5 people. Let me get my little calculator here for this. But let's say you infect 5 people one day, and the next day those 5 people infect 5 people, so that's obviously 25. That's pretty easy math. The next day, each one of those 25 people infects 5 people. You're at 125. Next, again, 5 people. You're up to 625. I just got a text message. 625 times 5 times 5. And before you know it, you're in the thousands of people infected. You're like, before you know it, you're at 15,625 people that you infected, because you infected 5 people, and they infected 5 people, and they infected 5 people, and you're still not even feeling sick. Does that make sense? Okay, now it's easy to plug numbers into a mathematical equation and just kind of see how they slope up. Doesn't really work like that in real life. I mean, yes it does, but that's a set number. But let's say you went to a hockey game and you're sick, and there's what, 20,000 people there. So that's a lot more people that you're around. You go to the bathroom, you go to the concession stand, you're sitting around a bunch of people, and you may cough on somebody, or you may cough on something that dozens of other people touch, and then not only that day, but in the next few days. So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that you go to a hockey game and you infect 20 people. And then those 20 people infect 5 people in their daily lives. That's 100 people in a matter of what, 2 days? Times 5 is 500, times 5 is 2,500, and you still don't know that you're sick. You know, it spreads fast. Again, it's easy to just plug numbers into a mathematical equation. So what do these numbers mean? Well, the good news is most cases seem to be mild to moderate. Mild means it's kind of like the flu, and you don't really need to go anywhere or seek medical attention, but you may want to, you know, take some Tylenol or drink some fruit juice and do other things that you normally do when you're sick to keep yourself from getting more sick. But if it's a moderate case or a severe case or a critical case, you're looking at needing a ventilator to get oxygen. So if the number of cases just keep going up and up and up, you start to run out of hospital resources. You run out of PPE for the staff because they don't want to get sick, and you run out of ventilators, which are in short supply. So if the cases just keep going up and up and up, you're running out of all these resources, and there's a threshold from when the graph goes up. There's a threshold of being able to actually sustain the number of people in the hospital system. So, you know, you're okay as long as you're below the threshold, but if we keep going up and up and up in this rapid motion, then eventually you'll hit the threshold, and then tough decisions need to be made. You know, I've heard of decisions in Italy where they said, you know, anybody over 65 or something, if anybody's sick over the age of 65, they don't get medical treatment. They're just gonna die. And when you hit the threshold and you have to make these decisions like this, then your death rate goes up by a lot. And other things that you might not think about is, let's say somebody has a heart attack and you're near the threshold. Well, that person with a heart attack is probably going to die because all the resources are being used for the coronavirus pandemic and not for somebody with a heart attack or somebody with a stroke or somebody with an asthma attack or somebody who was in a car accident. All those resources are being used over here. There's not as many resources over here, so more of these people are dying as well. Get the picture? So when they say social distance yourself, you need to take that seriously, because if the numbers just keep going up and up and up, and like they will, there's just no way around it. They're going to go up until they reach the top, and then they'll eventually go down, and it may fluctuate a little bit, but eventually it'll go down. And of course there are drugs that are being tested and vaccines being tested, and there's other things that can help slow the spread. But the best thing to slow the spread is by social distancing yourself, washing your hands, and just taking all these measures that they're saying to take into consideration, and not thinking that they're nothing, because they're something. One last point I want to make is that people will compare this to the H1N1, or they'll compare it to Ebola or West Nile virus or whatever. So, and they'll take all these, these statistics and stuff from all these other pandemics, and they'll say, well, not as many people have died from coronavirus as died of swine flu, or there's nowhere near enough as many cases as swine flu. And that's true, but you're forgetting one very important aspect of the equation. Swine flu happened a long time ago. Those numbers are set. They're not going anywhere. They're not going up. I mean, yeah, swine flu is still a thing, but it's not as big of a thing, and it's the numbers that are put into those equations are set from that period of time when that pandemic happened, and those are the set numbers. They don't take into consideration who gets swine flu today, because the pandemic is over and it's just basically seen as something, as the same thing as like the flu, where you have shots and vaccines, and it's not seen as it was back when it actually first happened. This pandemic is now, these numbers are now, they're rising, and they will continue to rise. So just because not as many people have died today as died with the swine flu back then, doesn't mean that this number today could go up double tomorrow, double the day after that, the day after that. Maybe not necessarily double, but definitely go up and up and up until you get to the point where, oh crap, more people died of the coronavirus than the swine flu, because we didn't take it seriously. And another thing is, if you run out of your hospital resources, you run out of staff, because the staff are starting to get sick too. And when somebody on the staff gets sick, they're taken out of the workforce until they're better, or else they might die. And it's a very real possibility, just because they're being overworked. Their immune system is not the best, because they're not taking in all the proper nutrients that they need for their immune system to function properly, because they're just constantly working, trying to save lives, the lives that people are not seeming to take seriously. And the fewer hospital workers you have, the bigger the pandemic is. So, and if you run out of resources and the hospital system collapses, then what are you left with? You're left with a real life apocalypse, because there's nobody left to save the people who are dying. And then it becomes all about getting food and fighting over food, and if you get sick, you're probably going to die because there's no hospitals left. And when that time comes, you're going to want to make sure that you have one of these, because you're going to want one of these to protect what you have. But let's not let it get to that point. take this pandemic seriously. Subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm RedneckMini14, and until next time, be safe.